is central because India is now only maybe a third of the population urbanized, much below China, much below the world average. So this will be gathering pace very powerfully. So this story I've told for the world has a very powerful, arguably the most important example is India, along with Africa, which probably will double in population and will grow very fast. Those are the two places, if you like, where this process of urbanization will happen most intensely. So India is absolutely key here. By the way, when we talk about India's urban population doubling between now and mid-century from around 400 million or so to about 800 million or so, that's actually a growth rate of urban population, which is only about a couple of percent. A couple of percent doubles in 35 years. So when we say the 400 goes to 800, you're assuming a 2% growth rate in Indian cities for the next 35 years. My guess is that's too low. My guess is that they will grow faster than that. Some of you know I've lived and worked in one village for more than 40 years and looked around in UP. And you look around, those kids are now getting educated where they weren't educated before. Boys and increasingly girls. I don't think they're going to stay there. And I don't think the forecasts of a 2% growth rate in the urban areas is fast enough. So in other words, I'm saying that we've probably in this report been a bit cautious. No harm in that because it's a very powerful conclusions in any case. But I don't think we've overcooked this story. I think it's still stronger probably than what is here. So I've tried to sort of set this in a very broad context. Now let me say something very briefly about the research itself because you'll be hearing a lot more of that from what's coming. But it's not often you pick up a piece of work and say, I wished I'd written that. And this is one of those cases. I had the privilege of talking to some of the people at an early stage, but that's not, and they very nicely thank myself and a few others. But the hard work in this paper was very well conceived and very well carried through. I've not seen before a result. I may not be the most widely read person in the world, but I had not seen before that result which shows that more compact cities actually grow faster. And that was something that you could do with these data. You've been able to look at convergence too. Do the growth rates of the poorer cities look a bit higher than the others? A little bit, some, not universal, but some element of convergence. The kind of thing you are able to do with these kinds of data. And still more, it's not just a story of people running a few regressions on some lovely data set. It is that, of course, but it's more than that. The case studies, I think, are very powerful too. The policy story I find convincing. If you're going to have compact cities, you must do something about the regulations that push in the opposite direction. And that's a very powerful and important conclusion. Clearly the whole transport story has to change if congested cities are to be avoided, with very powerful emphasis on public transport. And as was just mentioned by Neeraj Mandloy, the Internet of Things is going to kick in very hard on, and productively, on the way in which we manage transport. You're going to need 5G for that because you're going to have an awful lot of communication with the vehicles which you're linking up and controlling and so on. The days when you could just pick up your car and go where you like, when you like, surely must be over very soon. Managing those kinds of stories with an Internet of Things and traffic management linked up with your car or your electric car or your capsule or whatever it might be, I think will be very important. And you're going to need very strong broadband for that. But you've got nice competition going in this country over 4G and 5G, and that I think will be very healthy. So the public model will be very important. Finally, the finance and taxation side. And again, Niraj Mandloy mentioned that, and I think it's enormously important. When I was here in 81, 82, I worked partly on the village, but mostly on the tax system of India. And we in the UK have a lot to answer for. I was born only 1 year before independence, so my influence was limited. But the 1935 Government of India Act, which was taken more or less into the Constitution, carried an enormous burden. It's made tax reform very hard. I was working on value-added tax in 1981-82, interacting with Dr. Manmohan Singh and others. And eventually, you got to the GST. Finally, in these very recent times. And it was one of the problems was that Government of India 1935 Act, which sort of entrenched the tax system in a way that made it very difficult to reform indirect taxation in a way that integrated, as it were, across the whole economy. The next margin is surely city taxation. You cannot have cities taking initiatives on anything like the scale and independence that is absolutely necessary for this unless they have a decent tax base. And that seems to me, and is very much in Niraj Mandloy's remarks, I really want to emphasize that very strongly. You have to have that in place. The benefits from the much better cities come in terms of people's lives and land values and so on. And you don't want cities raising money by selling land and expanding the margin. You want cities raising money by efficient taxation of a core part which doesn't grow very quickly. And that's going to be extremely important. So I did want to recognize that the policies that I identified here around regulation, public transport, taxation are absolutely critical. Now the final thing, given how clear this sense of direction is, how does anything ever happen? What are the political points of entry here? How can the demands be made? How can you go beyond saying, yes, this is a nice paper, I really see the point, yeah? And then what happens? I think what would be very good to have around this table is a splendid group to do that. How does this actually happen? Who takes the decisions? Where does the pressure have to be? Because in the nature of things, big decisions, even though they carry enormous benefit, big decisions don't necessarily get taken at the level that you need them. You need them taken at the top, and you need them taken at the cities. The states of India have to relinquish some control down to the cities. How can that political change happen in the time scale that we need? And I hope we can discuss that as we go along. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Stern. Your endorsement of the report means a lot to us. May I now request our chairperson, Dr. Ahluwalia, for her special remark.
Thank you, Rajat. Something happens. I need to change. Like with the sensor. Huh? Yeah. I'm glad that you said remarks and not address. I'm a little bit allergic to the word address, especially at this time of the evening, and when you're going to have the report presentation and a panel discussion. So I'm really going to limit myself to a few remarks of welcome to all of you who are here, and I'm delighted that we are launching this report here, and we have a chance to have a presentation and then it being discussed. And all of that has to be done before we get to dinner. So the best contribution that I could make is by saying as little as possible, but I can't resist the temptation of saying a couple of things, Neeraj, mainly for your ears, yeah? The first point I would like to make is that, while it's nice to hear everyone say that the High-Powered Expert Committee report is there for us all to see, the truth is that we had very little information to work with. We have virtually no data on which we can base our analysis and recommendations. So we put together the best that we could, and I will seriously plead with you that you should somehow create a basis by which we can generate better data on cities and service delivery. And you know what is worse than not having data is having very unreliable data. Like we have service level benchmarks that have been set up, and then the cities were asked to fill in some forms on what they thought they were doing vis-a-vis the service level benchmarks. And if you know anything about any city and you look at those numbers, you know that there is absolutely no relationship. And when you go to the city level officials and say to them, how come you have this? And they said, oh, we don't know. We just gave it to someone to fill the forms. Now, that should be really banned. Either we don't have data or we have data that we can rely on. The second point I would like to highlight, you know, finance has been mentioned, and this is a point that we made in the report also. To my mind, finance is much less of a challenge than governance. If you have governance, money would come. And Neeraj, you yourself mentioned that, you know, you're focusing on reforms. And I think if that is the priority, if you can indeed get reforms going, then you will see that through public-private partnership, money will come. But if reforms do not take place, then there is no way that you will get funding. So that's the second point. And the third, and that's the last, is that again something which we all recognize, but no government, neither the UPA nor this government, I think, has paid sufficient attention to capacity building at all levels of government. And it's not just at the level of the urban local government, even at the level of the state government, and if I may say so, also at the level of the government of India. We need to get to that on war footing, because, you know, these are very specialized areas of urban planning, zoning, even water and sanitation that you mentioned. So we need to have, you know, we need to reactivate Masuri to have special programs where, you know, officers from all ministries go there and, you know, get to build their capacity. If we do that, then I really do think if we can put an urban governance framework in place, and if we can empower our cities, in which states have a much larger role than the government of India, we could actually bring about planned urbanization. But I have to say that there is a lot of talk. We still need to see if at all levels of government we will walk that talk. So with that, let me again welcome you all, and we get to the next stage of the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishar. The next stage is, before the technical session gets underway, I'll just take a couple of minutes to launch the report. May I request everybody on the dais here, I mean, no dais, but here, to kind of release to all of you. Could you? That's okay. That's okay. So if we stand for, yes, please do please open it. Yes.
We're doing this
Together.